Europe may look peaceful on the surface, but behind closed doors, something big is shifting. New military agreements, rising border tensions, and sudden strategic moves suggest the continent might be quietly stepping into a new clash with Russia. Today, we uncover the signals the world is ignoring and what this could mean for global stability. Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's topic is one that's becoming impossible to ignore, even though most headlines try to soften it or push it aside. Europe, once confident that the post-Cold War era had removed the threat of major conflict on the continent, is now facing a reality that feels unsettlingly familiar. Over the last few years, Russia's actions, from the full-scale invasion of Ukraine to increased military exercises near NATO borders, have forced European nations to completely rethink their defense strategies. Countries that once reduced their armies are now rapidly rebuilding them. Diplomats are suddenly sounding alarms. Military budgets are rising faster than at any point in decades, and emergency meetings within NATO are happening more frequently. In this video, we'll break down whether Europe is truly entering a new confrontation with Russia, or whether these moves are simply precautionary steps shaped by global uncertainty. To understand whether Europe is drifting toward confrontation with Russia, we must examine the political landscape. For years, European leaders tried maintaining a delicate balance, trading heavily with Russia while relying on diplomatic channels to prevent tension from escalating. But after 2022, everything changed. Trust vanished, negotiations froze, and Russia began positioning itself as a power willing to challenge Western influence openly. Several European countries, especially those near Russia, now insist that Moscow wants to reshape Europe's borders and weaken NATO's unity. Political speeches across the continent reflect a new tone: firm, skeptical, and prepared for conflict if necessary. Even neutral countries like Finland and Sweden have shifted their positions dramatically, joining NATO to seek protection. These political decisions show a Europe that no longer believes peaceful coexistence with Russia is guaranteed. Instead, the region is preparing for a more aggressive, unpredictable geopolitical environment. Military transformation is one of the clearest signs that Europe is preparing for potential confrontation. For decades, European armies were downsized under the assumption that large-scale war was unlikely. But now defense budgets are skyrocketing. Germany announced a historic military investment plan. Poland is purchasing advanced American and Korean weapon systems, and Scandinavian countries are strengthening joint defense networks. NATO forces are being deployed across Eastern Europe, reinforcing borders from the Baltic states to Romania. Joint military drills have become more intense and frequent, simulating cyber attacks, missile strikes, and hybrid warfare scenarios. The message is clear: Europe is no longer treating military preparedness as optional. These changes reflect a belief that Russia could escalate tensions beyond Ukraine. While none of these countries want war, they are preparing for the possibility that deterrence will only work if Europe demonstrates overwhelming readiness. This shift represents a significant turn from the optimism of the past. Economic pressure adds another layer to this developing clash. Europe once relied heavily on Russian energy, particularly natural gas. This dependency created vulnerabilities, giving Russia leverage in political negotiations. After the Ukraine invasion, Europe moved aggressively to reduce this reliance, investing in renewable energy, new gas pipelines, and LNG imports from the United States and the Middle East. While this shift strengthened Europe's strategic independence, it also intensified economic rivalry with Russia. Moscow, in response, redirected its resources toward Asian markets, especially China. Sanctions from the EU have targeted Russian banks, technology sectors, and energy revenues, while Russia has retaliated through cyber attacks and disruptions in global supply chains. The economic battlefield is now fully active. Although not as visible as military action, these economic strategies reveal a long-term struggle for influence and stability, making it clear that Europe and Russia are locked in a competition far deeper than trade disputes. Public opinion throughout Europe has also shifted dramatically, influencing political decisions and strategic planning. Before 2022, many Europeans saw Russia as a distant threat. A strong country, yes, but not one that would push directly against European territory or values. Today, polls show a significant majority of Europeans believe Russia poses a real risk to the continent's security. Citizens in Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia express deep concern about potential aggression. Even countries farther west, like France and Germany, are experiencing rising anxiety about hybrid warfare, including cyber attacks, disinformation campaigns, and election interference. This shift in public sentiment matters because it shapes election outcomes and pressures governments to take stronger stances. When populations no longer feel safe, leaders cannot appear weak. As fear spreads, Europe becomes more united in its approach toward Russia, and that unity itself can be interpreted by Moscow as a strategic challenge. Diplomatically, the space for dialogue between Europe and Russia has shrunk to almost nothing. Before major tensions escalated, European leaders frequently traveled to Moscow, attempting negotiations over energy deals, trade, and conflict resolution. But those channels are now nearly closed. Embassies have reduced staff, communication lines have tightened, and trust has eroded to the lowest point in decades. Russia accuses Europe of being manipulated by the United States, while Europe accuses Russia of violating international law and destabilizing neighboring countries. Mediation attempts by France, Germany, and Turkey have brought limited results, further reinforcing the belief that diplomacy may no longer be enough to prevent conflict. Without strong communication, misunderstandings can escalate quickly, and history has shown that when great powers stop talking, tensions rise uncontrollably. The absence of robust diplomatic engagement increases the likelihood that small incidents could trigger larger confrontations, making the situation even more fragile. Another concerning development is the buildup of military infrastructure along NATO's eastern flank. From the Arctic Circle to the Black Sea, new bases, radar systems, missile defenses, and troop reinforcements have been deployed. Russia sees this expansion as a direct provocation, claiming NATO is preparing for offensive operations. Europe, however, argues that these measures are purely defensive and necessary to protect member states bordering Russia. Both sides frame their actions as reactions to each other, creating a dangerous feedback loop. For example, when NATO increases troops in the Baltics, Russia responds by placing more forces in Kaliningrad. When Russia tests new hypersonic missiles, Europe accelerates missile defense programs. This tit-for-tat behavior is not yet open conflict, but it resembles the early stages of geopolitical rivalry that historically leads to confrontation. The buildup may not guarantee war, but it undeniably increases the chance of accidental encounters that escalate beyond control. Beyond the military and political spheres, Europe and Russia are clashing in the information arena. Disinformation campaigns, propaganda networks, and cyber attacks have become powerful tools of modern conflict. European intelligence agencies warn that Russia is attempting to manipulate elections, amplify social divisions, and weaken trust in democratic institutions. At the same time, Russia accuses Europe of spreading anti-Russian narratives and supporting opposition movements within Russian territory. This digital battlefield is crucial because it shapes perceptions long before any physical conflict occurs. A divided society is easier to influence and harder to defend. Europe has responded by strengthening cybersecurity, investing in digital literacy, and creating task forces to identify and counter foreign interference. But the challenge remains enormous as modern information warfare operates at speeds traditional institutions struggle to match. The ongoing digital struggle illustrates that conflict today extends far beyond borders, armies, or diplomatic negotiations. It reaches citizens directly. One key question remains: does Europe want to clash with Russia? The answer is clearly no. War would have devastating consequences for the entire continent. However, Europe recognizes that ignoring emerging threats could be even more dangerous. Therefore, the continent is preparing for the possibility of conflict without actively seeking it. The current strategy focuses on deterrence, showing Russia that Europe is strong enough to defend itself, united enough to resist pressure, and ready enough to avoid being surprised. But deterrence works only if both sides interpret it correctly. If Russia views European actions as threatening, it may escalate. If Europe underestimates Russia's willingness to act, it may be caught off guard. This delicate balance is what makes the situation so unstable. Europe is not entering a conflict by choice, but it may be stepping into one by necessity, driven by geopolitical realities that can no longer be ignored. So, is Europe quietly entering a new clash with Russia? The evidence suggests that while neither side openly declares war, both are preparing for long-term confrontation. The buildup of military capabilities, shrinking diplomatic dialogue, rising public concern, and evolving economic strategies all point toward a relationship that is no longer cooperative, but competitive and potentially adversarial. This doesn't mean open war is inevitable, but it does mean Europe is adjusting to a world where Russia is no longer a partner, but a challenge. The coming years will determine whether this tension stabilizes into a controlled rivalry or escalates into something far more dangerous. Understanding these dynamics is crucial because global security, economies, and political alliances will all be affected. For now, Europe appears to be preparing quietly, hoping for peace, but bracing for the possibility of conflict. The question is, will preparation be enough to prevent escalation? If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more deep, analytical content every week. Stay informed and stay prepared.